Shabbat Shalom. In this Parashat Bahaalotecha, we come across a fascinating example of human psychology. The Jewish people have experienced many miracles throughout the leaving of Egypt, the Exodus, crossing the Red Sea, Har Sinai, and so on and so forth. And you would expect maybe that these people would be totally in awe and just constantly singing hallelujah for the luck that they had being taken out of slavery, and what more could you expect? And yet, in this week's Parsha, we really see the human element coming to bear. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, took care of them and gave them everything that they could have asked for, they constantly complain. And among those complaints is a fascinating pasuk that I think is really interesting to dissect. We find in the Perek Yud Aleph, "Vaytza'ak ha'am el Moshe," and the people cried out to Moshe, and later, "Va'asafsuf asher bekirbo itavu ta'ava," there was this great lust and frustration and unhappiness that was going on. "Vayishvu vayivku gam bnei Israel," and even though it started on the fringes, it really kind of took off. The whole Jewish people was sitting and crying. You can just imagine like a toddler having a tantrum. "Vayomru mi yachilenu basar." We want to eat meat. Now, what does mi yachilenu basar really mean? Mi yachilenu basar is not just I want a good steak. Mi yachilenu basar represents I want the ability of stability to be able to eat meat in a civilized manner. And by the way, eating meat very often demands a large amount of time. It demands places where you can store the meat. In the ancient world, there are no refrigerators. You needed cool places that often were basements or caves or storerooms. Basically, meat represents the ideas of stability. I want to be able to sit down and actually put down some roots. And then here beautifully, we have the flashback. Zacharnu et hadaga asher nochal b'Mitzrayim. Chinam. We remember the fish that we would eat in Egypt for free. Obviously, Egypt had the Nile. There are plenty of fish in the Nile. We know this also from the Makav Dam. All the fish died in the Nile. Ve'et kishuim, and all of these different types of vegetables. Ve'et avatichim. Again, kishuim and avatichim today mean aubergines, eggplants, and watermelons, but that's not necessarily what they meant in the ancient Hebrew. There's a modern Hebrew terminologies. Ve'et chatzir, ve'et betzalim, ve'et shumim, and the onions and the garlic and all of these different things that would really give us flavor. And now we're here in the desert and we're eating man. We're eating this manna from the sky, which is kind of flavorless in a way, and or overly flavorful depending on the midrash. And we miss normality. We miss normal life. And now we're all dry, we have nothing to eat. All we have is this damn man. You can just imagine them kind of. But what is beautiful is that the picture that they paint of their lives in Egypt are lives of calm and, living, fishing in the river for free. They had no responsibilities. They could eat any vegetables or any watermelons that they like. What about the slavery? What about the affliction? What about all of their people dying and the children being thrown into those same rivers? But no, I'm fishing. I don't remember any of that. We often tend to be nostalgic about things and completely forget the damning elements of those experiences that made us wish to escape those in the first place. By the way, this is not the first time that the Jews have actually had this sentiment. We find previously in Sefer Shmot, where the Jewish people complain already quite right after they leave Egypt. And we find that they turn to Hashem and they say, "Vayomru Eloheim bnei Yisrael, miten mutenu biyad Hashem be'eretz Mitzrayim." We wish that God had killed us too when we were in the land of Egypt. B'shivteinu al sir habasar, when we sat next to the stew pot. Be'ochlenu lechem lasova, when we had as much bread as we wanted. Ki hotzetem otanu el hamidbar hazeh la'amit et kol ha'ka'al hazeh barav. You've taken us out of here to kill us all with starvation. Again, this hearkening back to the good old days back in Egypt when we sat by the campfire and had as much bread, as much fish, chinam, all the vegetables. Oh, do you remember that? Do you remember that? What about everything else? So there is a beautiful midrash in Masechet Yoma that says there's a machloket. We remember the fish. Pligei Barav Shmuel. Two Amoraim have an argument, a disagreement. Chad Amar Dagim Mamash. One of them says these people are complaining about actual food. V'chad Amar Arayot. And the other person, the other Shita, says no, they were claiming they were missing the immorality of Egypt. Man damar dagim dichtiv asher nochal, uman damar arayot dichtiv chinam. Those that say that they were complaining about the actual food, they missed the actual food, quotes the pasuk asher nochal that we used to eat. And those that say that they were complaining about the immorality, the arayot, the sexual immorality, they focus on the word chinam, for free. And I think here lies the secret. What is slavery? It is many things. It is subjugation. It is being forced to do things you don't want to do. But it is also a freedom from responsibility, ironically. A slave has no responsibility. He is told what to do, and he does it. He's told when to go to sleep, when to eat, what to eat, when to live, when to die. He's not responsible. He's not a free man. With freedom comes a responsibility to make decisions and to actually own up to those decisions and take responsibility for making bad decisions. The slaves, when they're still in their slave mentality, the Jews that leave Mitzrayim, one of the things that they have to get out of their head is that freedom of responsibility that they now are nostalgic for. That we could sit on the side of the river and eat as much fish as we want. It wasn't free. You were a slave. You didn't pay for it because it was your master's, but it wasn't free. You, in your mind, had this concept of lack of responsibility. And Chazal, in another place, say that slaves very often have the danger of falling into immorality because, as they say, marbe avadim marbe shfachot marbe arayot. If you are not responsible for anything, then do what the heck you like. You can sleep with whoever you want. You can marry whoever you want. You have no responsibility because you don't actually have to pay for anything. It's all for free. And as such, ironically, the lack of responsibility that comes with slavery can sometimes be very, very alluring. In many ways, that is maybe the freedom. When the Gemara says that they were harkening back to the immorality, it represents that freedom of responsibility. What does that mean for us today? It means that we can always look back with nostalgia at things of the past. Very often people think of nostalgia of when they were kids. Oh, when I was a kid, I had no worries. I could run around, I could play. But yes, you had no responsibilities. You didn't have to pay any mortgages. You didn't have to pay any bills. You didn't have to wake up in the morning for work. You had that freedom, but that freedom actually came from a lack of responsibility, not from true freedom itself. So when we're nostalgic for things, we remember the good old days, sometimes it's helpful to remember that no, the fact that we today have the ability to do a bunch of things, the ability to actually take care of ourselves, maybe if we're talking about on the national level, today we can actually fight, and today we can actually defend ourselves, and today we can actually build our own future. That is itself, even though maybe it is very demanding of us, and it takes away a lot of our freedoms, but that is the ultimate freedom itself. And to be able to just live under someone else's boot, maybe feels Mitzrayim, you can eat whatever you can eat, but that's not really free. So I give us a bracha, B'ezrat Hashem, that this week we strive to appreciate the freedoms that we have, the freedoms and the responsibilities that give us those freedoms. And that when we are nostalgic, we remind ourselves of, yes, sometimes we have, rose-tinted glasses, we think back, everything was awesome, even Mitzrayim, but no, the answer is today, there's nothing like today. So B'ezrat Hashem, may we continue looking forward and not looking back, appreciating what we have, continuing to take responsibility. B'ezrat Hashem, we will be truly, truly free. Shabbat Shalom.